My parents disinherited me for being too independent and left everything to my brother. Years later, when he abandoned them, they came begging, so I sold my house and relocated. Okay, gather round, because I need to tell you about something that absolutely shattered me and then, somehow, made me stronger than I ever thought possible. Can you imagine dedicating your entire life to trying to prove your worth to the two people who brought you into this world, only to have them casually tell you they've written you out of their future? That's exactly what happened to me, and the way they did it. It was a gut punch I'll never forget. For as long as I can remember, I, a 30-year-old woman, knew deep down that my parents saw my younger brother, Ron, differently than they saw me. It was this nagging feeling, this quiet knowledge that I pushed away, always holding on to a sliver of hope. A hope that one day they'd look at me and see more than just the independent child, the one who grew up too fast, the one they could just set aside because, oh, she'll manage. That tiny, fragile hope? It was utterly, brutally crushed the day they told me about their will. It wasn't some big, dramatic family blowout, you know? No screaming, no tears, no shocking betrayal. It was almost indifferent. My mom called, super casual, asking me to drop by when I had time, said they had something to discuss. So, I show up, and they're just chilling. Dad's reading the newspaper, Mom's pouring coffee. It felt normal, comfortable even. But the second I sat down, my dad puts the paper aside and just drops the bomb. They'd updated their will. Everything was going to Ron. Everything. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Everything. My dad just nodded. The house. Their savings. The lake house. Literally every single thing they owned. My mom, always the gentler one, reached for my hand. She said they'd done it because Ron had promised to take care of them. He'd assured them they'd never be alone, that he would handle things when they got older. And me? I almost didn't ask, but the words just slipped out. And me? My father smiled. A kind smile, almost. You don't need it, he said, as if that was the most obvious thing in the world. You've always been independent. You'll be fine. I just stared at them. I waited for the punchline, for them to say they were kidding, for any sign that they'd actually thought about what this meant. But there was nothing. No hesitation. No guilt. They had made their decision, and to them, it made perfect, undeniable sense. I'd always been fine on my own, so why would that change now? Something inside me just crumbled. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the house. It was the gut-wrenching realization that I had never, not once, been part of their plans. I was the person they assumed would just continue without needing a second thought. I didn't argue. I sat there for another agonizing moment, just memorizing their faces, so utterly sure, so certain that this was the right choice. Then I stood up. My mother called my name, but I ignored her. I walked out, got into my car, and just drove. I never asked them to reconsider. Never tried to explain why it hurt so much. Because what was the point? They had made their choice. And now, I would make mine. I don't know how long I sat in my car outside their house after that. Minutes, maybe an hour. The engine was off, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The weight of it all pressed down on me. It was the confirmation of something I'd spent my entire life trying not to believe. They had never planned for me to be part of their future. I was a guest in their lives, someone they loved in theory, but never truly considered. I was useful, reliable, the daughter who could stand on her own 2 feet. Ron, he'd always needed them more, so they clung to that. It was easier to center their world around him than to acknowledge that I had been there too, quietly waiting. The worst part? I had spent years convincing myself I didn't care, that it didn't matter, that I didn't need them to love me the way they loved Ron. But sitting there in my car, swallowing around the lump in my throat, I finally had to face the truth. I had always wanted to believe that if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself enough, they would see me, that they would choose me, just once. Now, I finally knew the answer. It broke me. After that day, I stopped trying. Not in some grand, dramatic way. No tearful confrontations. No declarations that I was done. I just let go. I stopped calling first. Stopped making excuses for why they never reached out. Stopped pretending I didn't notice how easily they could forget me when I wasn't standing right in front of them. And for a while, I think they didn't even notice the distance. They still sent holiday invitations, group texts to the whole family. My mother would still text occasionally, always something brief and impersonal. Hope you're doing well. Are you keeping busy? She never asked how I felt. My father never called at all. It was fine. Or at least, I told myself it was. I had a life, a good life. I'd built everything on my own, without their help. I had a career I was proud of and friends who actually cared. I'd made a home for myself, something that was mine and only mine. And yet, there were moments. Quiet, unexpected moments where the grief just crept in. Like when I got a huge promotion at work and instinctively reached for my phone, only to realize there was no one to call. Not really. My parents wouldn't care. They'd never cared about my career, only Ron's. He was the one they talked about with pride, the one whose milestones were celebrated. Or when I spent Christmas alone that first year, politely declining their invitation. They hadn't even pushed, hadn't asked why. My absence at the family gathering was just a minor inconvenience, easily brushed aside. I sat on my couch that night, staring at the twinkling lights of my tiny Christmas tree, and wondered if they'd even noticed I wasn't there. Maybe they hadn't. Maybe they had. And it just didn't matter. I should have known it wouldn't last forever. They didn't need me until they did. It was almost funny how predictable it was, how quickly they remembered my existence when they finally needed something from me. It started with small things. A message from my mother, longer than usual. "Just checking in," she said. "We haven't heard from you in a while." I didn't respond. A week later, another one. She mentioned Ron in passing, how busy he was with his new job, how he and his wife had moved to another state. No details, no hint of anything wrong, just casual conversation. Still, no response from me. Then my father called. I stared at the screen, watching his name flash for a long moment before letting it go to voicemail. The next day, my mother tried again. She left a message. "We'd really like to see you," she said. There was something off about her voice, something almost uncertain. "Please call me back when you have time." I should have ignored it. I wanted to ignore it. But that stupid, stubborn part of me, the one that still longed for something I knew I'd never get, hesitated. I was slightly concerned that something major had happened. So I called. My mother picked up on the first ring, her voice breathless, almost relieved. She asked how I'd been, and then she said she missed me. It was all so carefully worded, so deliberate, like she was choosing each phrase with extreme caution. I was confused. She didn't use words like that when talking to me. Then she said it. "Your father and I were wondering if you'd come by. Just for dinner." I asked why. A pause. Then, quieter. "Well, things haven't been easy lately." She still wouldn't say it outright. She wanted me to ask. She wanted me to be the one to lead the conversation, to give her the opening to explain. I didn't. She continued anyway. That's when she told me. Ron had moved away. He and his wife had settled in another state, far enough that regular visits were out of the question. My parents had assumed, of course, that this was temporary, that once they got settled, Ron would make good on his promise. Except he hadn't. He barely called. When he did, he was distant, rushed. He was busy. He had a life now, responsibilities. My parents had paid for his college, his wedding, helped them buy their first home. They had given him everything, and now, he had nothing left to take. My parents had spent years banking on the idea that Ron would be their safety net, that he would take care of them when they got older. They had rewritten their will for him, put all their faith in him, and now they were realizing their mistake. I listened, silent, as my mother tried to spin it like it was no big deal, like they weren't completely unprepared for this, like they hadn't just admitted that they had never once considered that I might have been the one to stay. I let them talk. I let them ask. And when they finally did, when my mother hesitantly, nervously asked if maybe I could come by more often, if I could help them with a few things now that Ron was gone, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so pathetic. All these years, they had made their choice. Over and over again, they had chosen Ron. And now, they were coming to me, hoping I would step in like some backup plan, some forgotten insurance policy they had suddenly remembered existed. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked her the same thing I had asked years ago, the last time they had made it clear where I stood. "Why me?" Another pause. My mother stammered, clearly taken aback. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you made it very clear that Ron was supposed to take care of you, that I wasn't part of that picture. So why me? Why now?" She fumbled for a response, but there wasn't one that could change what had already been done. I let her sit in that silence for a moment. Then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I told her, "I hope you figure it out, but it won't be with my help." And then I hung up. That was the last time I ever let them ask anything of me. I thought that was the end of it. I thought they would take my silence for what it was, a final answer, a closed door. But I underestimated their ability to ignore reality when it didn't suit them. It started small, as it always did. A text from my mother a week later. "We should talk." I didn't respond. Then my father called, twice in one day, then again the next. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages piled up, each one more desperate than the last. My mother started with guilt. "You're being unreasonable. Families don't turn their backs on each other." Then came my father's anger. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat us?" And finally, my favorite, the moment they realized I wasn't giving in. "We need you to come home." Home. As if that place had ever really been home for me. I deleted the messages and went on with my life, but they didn't stop. A month later, they showed up at my doorstep. I opened the door to find my mother standing there, looking smaller than I remembered, her face drawn tight with stress. My father was beside her, his posture stiff, his mouth already twisted into something between frustration and desperation. I didn't invite them in. Instead, I leaned against the door frame and asked what they wanted. My mother sighed like I was the one being difficult. She said they just wanted to talk. I told them they were already talking. She hesitated, then finally admitted the truth. They were struggling, not just emotionally, but financially. All the money they had poured into Ron, all the years they had spent funding his dreams, had drained them dry. They had been so sure he would take care of them that they had never even considered saving for themselves. And now, with no safety net, they were drowning. I didn't say anything. I just let the words settle between us. My father finally spoke, his voice gruff. He said they had made mistakes, that maybe they hadn't been fair to me in the past, but that didn't mean I could just abandon them now. I asked him why not. That caught him off guard. He stared at me, blinking, like he hadn't expected the question. I reminded him, point blank, that they had already abandoned me, that they had made a choice years ago to invest everything in Ron while treating me like an afterthought. And now, just because their plan had failed, they thought I would step in and fix everything? I told them I wasn't interested. My mother's face crumpled. She tried to appeal to my emotions, saying they were my parents, that family was supposed to take care of each other. I asked her, when had that ever applied to me? When had they ever taken care of me the way they had taken care of Ron? When had I ever been the priority? She couldn't answer, because she knew the truth. I had never been. Not once. They didn't give up right away. Over the next few weeks, they tried everything. They tried pity. "We're your parents. We raised you. We gave you everything." They tried guilt. "You're really going to let us struggle while you live so comfortably?" They even tried manipulation. "Ron would have helped us if he could. But you know, he has his own family now. You're the only one we have left." But none of it worked. Because no matter what they said, the truth remained the same. They weren't looking for a daughter. They were looking for a caretaker, a safety net. And I refused to be that for them. I blocked their numbers after that. It was the only way to make them stop. It hurt, of course it did. Even after everything, cutting them off completely felt like mourning something that had never really existed. But I was putting myself first, and that had to be enough. It had been months since I blocked them. Months of peace, of quiet. Months of finally being free. I thought they had finally given up. I should have known better, because one evening, just as I was getting home from work, I saw them standing right there on my doorstep. My mother looked thinner, her face drawn tight with stress. My father stood beside her, his posture stiff, his mouth already twisted into something between frustration and desperation. I didn't sigh. I didn't get angry. I didn't feel anything at all. I just walked up to my door, unlocked it, and turned to them. "What do you want?" My mother started talking immediately, rushing through her words like she thought I might slam the door in her face if she didn't speak fast enough. They were struggling more than before. Money was running out quicker than they had expected. Things were getting worse. They had tried everything, but it wasn't enough. And Ron, he refused to help. She sounded incredulous, like she still couldn't believe it, like the reality of Ron's abandonment had only just settled in. He said he had a family to take care of, my father muttered, his voice thick with resentment. He told us we should have thought about this earlier. I nodded. That made sense. And then, in the calmest, most even tone I had ever used with them, I said the words I had been wanting to say for a long time. "You should depend on Ron." Silence. I watched as their faces crumpled, as realization set in. I wasn't going to fix this for them. I wasn't going to save them. My mother's voice cracked as she tried again, saying he couldn't help, that he had his own responsibilities. And what does that have to do with me? I tilted my head, watching as she floundered for an answer. Because it didn't. It never had. You made your choice, I told them. You put everything into Ron. You trusted him with your future. And now you're facing the consequences of that. That has nothing to do with me. My father, always the one to get angry first, bristled. He accused me of being heartless, of enjoying this. He said I was punishing them for their mistakes, that no real daughter would act like this. I raised an eyebrow. A real daughter? That was rich coming from him. I reminded him point blank that a real parent wouldn't have thrown away one child for the sake of another. A real parent wouldn't have rewritten their will, cut me out of everything, and expected me to come crawling back the moment things got tough. That's not how this works, I told him. You don't get to ignore me for years, and then demand I fix your problems. My mother took a shaky breath. She tried to soften her tone, reaching for sympathy instead of guilt. We didn't know this would happen. I nodded again, and neither did I. Then, very calmly, I told them I didn't want to see their faces again. It wasn't an outburst. It wasn't some heat-of-the-moment anger. It was a simple fact. They had nothing to offer me. No love, no support, no connection worth salvaging. The only reason they were here was because they needed something from me. And that wasn't love. That wasn't family. That was desperation. I wasn't interested. My father's face twisted like he wanted to say something else. But I wasn't done. I told them, just in case they still thought they could pull something, that nothing they did would affect me. If they wanted to cry to our relatives, go ahead. I didn't care. Those relatives had never truly been close to me. Even if they heard about this, they'd shake their heads, maybe send me a text asking what happened, but that was it. Because they knew. They had always known. Even if they had never openly taken my side, they had never pretended to be close to me either. They had always kept their distance, and I had done the same. So, whatever sob story my parents tried to spin, it wouldn't change a thing. They weren't going to guilt me into fixing their mess. They weren't going to get sympathy from someone who had spent a lifetime being discarded. And if they thought they could emotionally blackmail me into caring, they were dead wrong. I wasn't asking for validation. Not from them. Not from anyone. I was done playing their game. And I could see it in their faces. The slow, painful realization that this was it. That there was nothing they could say to make me change my mind. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father's shoulders slumped. But I didn't waver. And when they finally turned to leave, when my mother took one last hesitant glance back, I didn't soften. I had almost forgotten about Ron. Almost. For months, my life had been blissfully quiet. No desperate knocks on my door. No emotional blackmail attempts. No distant relatives calling to shame me for abandoning my poor parents. And then one evening, I saw his name on my phone. At first, I just stared at it. Ron. Not Ron, my brother. Not Ron, the person I grew up with. Just Ron, a stranger who happened to share my blood. I let the call go to voicemail. Then I ignored the second one. And the third. By the time the fourth call came through, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up. At first, there was silence. Then a hesitant voice greeted me. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, waiting. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. He let out a small, forced laugh, said it had been a while. I said nothing. He tried again, asked how I was doing, how life had been. Fine. He paused, probably expecting me to return the question. I didn't. Eventually, he sighed. Said he wasn't going to pretend we had been close, but we were still family. Family? That was funny coming from him. But I let him continue, listening as he danced around the real reason he had called. He mentioned our parents, said he heard things had been rough for them, that they were struggling, that he felt bad about how things had turned out. I wasn't interested in his half-hearted guilt. So, I cut through the nonsense. What do you want? Silence again. Then, he finally admitted it. Our parents had gone to his in-laws for help. Apparently, they had been trying every route possible, knocking on doors they never would have considered before. Ron's wife wasn't pleased. Neither was her family. His in-laws had made it very clear that they weren't running a charity and that Ron was a grown man with his own responsibilities. So, of course, he decided to call me. I could hear it in his tone, the careful phrasing, the way he tried to make it seem like he was just looking out for them instead of trying to pawn them off on me. They're still our parents, he said. They made mistakes, sure, but they raised us. Raised who exactly? Because from where I was standing, they hadn't raised me. I told him flatly that I wasn't interested. He tried again, said it wasn't about money, that maybe if I could just be around them again, things would be better. I asked him where all this concern had been years ago. Where was this empathy when they cut me out of their will? Where was this sense of family when they poured everything into him, leaving nothing for me? I reminded him that we were never close, that I wasn't hurt by what he did because he was never my brother to begin with. We were more like acquaintances who had lived in the same house for a few years. He tried to argue, but I kept going. I told him that this wasn't some family tragedy for me. It wasn't some heartbreaking estrangement that I was losing sleep over. This was just cause and effect. They made their choices, and now they were living with them. Ron went quiet. I knew he wanted to push back, to argue, to insist that things weren't that simple, but he didn't, because deep down he knew it was. Finally, he let out a heavy breath, said he got it, that he wasn't expecting much from me anyway. I told him, good, because you aren't getting anything from me. He muttered something about how cold I was now, how I used to be different. I almost laughed again. I hadn't changed. I had just finally stopped pretending. I told him that too. And then I hung up. I didn't block him. I didn't need to, because I knew he wouldn't call again. The first thing I did after hanging up on Ron was sit in silence. I let the moment settle, let the weight of that conversation fade into nothing. Then I moved on, because unlike them, I had a future to focus on, and that future wasn't going to be here. A few weeks ago, I was offered a business opportunity in another state. It was a huge step forward, one that could set me up for life. At first, I hesitated, not because of them, but because it was a major change. Selling my house, uprooting my life, starting over in a new place. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt right. This place held too many memories, none of them good. I had bought this house for myself years ago, thinking it would be my sanctuary, my space. But now, it just felt like a weight, a reminder of people who had never deserved a place in my life to begin with. So, I made my decision. I was leaving. I met with my real estate agent the next day. She walked through the house with me, complimenting its condition, talking about the high market value. I barely paid attention. I had already detached from this place. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a house. By the time we sat down to discuss the listing price, I was already thinking ahead. New city, new job, new life. I didn't care what happened here. I just wanted it done. The paperwork was handled within days. Then came the actual packing. I didn't take much with me, just what I needed. Everything else. Sold. Donated. Given away. I didn't want reminders. I wanted clean, a fresh start. Every item I put in a box felt like shedding another layer of the past. I left behind the furniture I had bought with the idea of hosting family, because I no longer saw the need. The framed pictures of places I had visited alone were packed, while anything that held even a vague connection to my parents was discarded. I had spent years trying to hold on to things, believing that possessions could make up for the lack of love I had received. Now I understood they were just things, and things could be replaced. The only thing left was breaking the news to the few people who mattered. I told my close friends first. They were supportive, excited even. They knew this was what I needed. Then I debated telling my extended family, not because I owed them anything, but because I wanted them to know, once and for all, that I was done. So, I sent out a message. It was short and to the point. I let them know I was moving out of state, that I had sold my house, that I wouldn't be around anymore. The responses were predictable, a mix of where are you going, and why so suddenly. Some sent polite well wishes. Others, not so much. There were a few guilt-tripping messages, mostly from older relatives, about how families should stick together, and how I was being rash. I ignored them. They had never fought for me before. Why should I care what they thought now? I didn't know them more than that. And then, somehow my parents found out. I wasn't sure how. Maybe Ron told them. Maybe one of the relatives passed it along. It didn't matter. Because soon enough, there was another knock on my door. Another pathetic attempt to change my mind. I didn't even open it. I just stood by the window, watching as they lingered, knocking, waiting, hoping. And then finally, they left. Just like I would be. For good. When the moving truck finally arrived, I didn't feel nervous or sad. I just felt light. I wasn't carrying the weight of other people's expectations. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for approval that would never come. I was free, and that was worth more than anything they could have ever left me in a will. I had barely settled into my new place when I got the message. It was from Ron. For a second, I debated ignoring it. Ron's wife was pregnant, and our parents, they had shown up at his doorstep with their bags packed. They were selling their house. They had no backup plan, no savings. They had expected Ron to take them in. After all, he was their golden child, the one they had handed everything to, the one they had rewritten their will for, the one who had promised to take care of them. But Ron wasn't the obedient son they had imagined anymore. He had a wife, a baby on the way, responsibilities of his own. And suddenly, the weight of their expectations didn't seem so easy to carry. He didn't ask me for help, not directly, but his message was full of frustration, a thinly veiled attempt at sympathy. They were putting pressure on him, he said. He was overwhelmed. He didn't know what to do. I almost laughed. Almost. Because it wasn't my problem. It never had been. So, I sent him a simple reply. You wanted to be their only child. Now you are. Then I blocked his number. And just like that, I was finally, irrevocably free.